Hello and welcome to The Gist. I'm your host, Chris Vetrano, here every week to break down all the things that are happening in pop culture and interviewing the people that make it pop. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest to the podcast because when he shares his takes on anything, housewives, 90s nostalgia, or even frozen baked pastries, I feel like we're quite literally sharing a brain. He's a New York Times bestselling author, an actor, and his podcast, Everything Iconic, is a pop culture phenomenon all in itself. His new book, The Jolliest Bunch, Unhinged Holiday Stories, is out on October 24th. Can't wait to talk to him about it. So please welcome to The Gist, Danny Pellegrino. Hey, Danny.
Hi, Chris. I'm so happy to be here and chat with you. But before we even get into anything else, I need to know about these frozen desserts. Like, what was there a specific frozen dessert you're referring to?
Well, the baked pastries, the empanadas. And then, which I feel like we shared.
Emma's empanadas.
Yes, I feel like we shared some. I had to try them after hearing your reviews, and then of course Pop-Tarts. You are. I feel like you're like the official spokesperson now for Pop-Tarts.
I wish I was. I wish they would pay me. And by the way, Pop-Tarts, I just got the new pumpkin. I don't know if they're called pumpkin pie or pumpkin spice. You know how all these companies have the pumpkin thing. But I just tried the pumpkin Pop-Tart for the first time, and I honestly think they're really good. And I shouldn't be promoting them so much. And I know they're terrible for you. I don't know what's in them. I'm not sure many people do, but the pumpkin ones are very good.
Yes, I can't. Are those frosted? I can't remember if those have frosting.
Yeah, they're frosted. Yeah, I don't do the ones that aren't frosted. I'm not interested.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, it needs to be sweet. But awesome. I'm so thrilled to have you because you are the podcast sort of like pioneer in this space. And so it's been so wonderful to follow all of that. And then obviously your books, and we're going to get into the book and talk about some, I mean, it's truly unhinged, some of the stories in here.
Yeah.
I have been laughing out loud reading it. But I also want to just talk quickly on the podcast and how you got started. I'd love to just hear like, where did that come from? Where did you have the idea? And then because pretty quickly you had, I think like Greg Bennett was on it pretty early on, and like you were already having guests. So I'd love to hear a little bit of the backstory and how all of that got started for you.
Yeah, I had been living in Los Angeles for a handful of years, and I'd been doing stand-up and sketch comedy around town. And it was really, I was finding it very challenging to sort of navigate that world because as you're starting out, it's like I was doing shows for very small groups of people. I was doing sketch shows at 11 p.m. or I was doing stand-up at midnight, and I would be there was one show I remember doing, I think it was at the Comedy Store on Sunset, but it was like I was the 15th comedian on this bill on this thing. And I was at the very end of the night. I was the last one to go on. And it was not a headliner situation. It was like the worst comedian was at the end, or not, like the whatever. So long story short, I just was finding it challenging doing that kind of routine for so long. And it sort of came together when I was having some personal struggles, some depression. And at that point in my life, I thought, I'm never going to perform again. I'm done. A friend had told me you should think about starting a podcast because you could do some sort of your bits or your jokes from your home, and you don't have to get out of bed. You don't have to go to these shows at midnight or later. And so eventually, as I sort of got through the depression and stuff, I picked up a microphone and started podcasting. And I didn't know really if it would go anywhere or if it would do anything. I was kind of just doing it to kind of learn the medium. And I had a little bit of an Instagram following because I'd been making a lot of memes and stuff on Instagram. And so I was able to get some people to listen to the podcast, and then people just started sharing, and it started growing more so than I would have thought. And I'm so grateful to some of the people that came on early. You mentioned Greg Bennett. I love Greggy, and he was kind enough to come on. And there were a couple housewives. I remember Margaret Josephs was like a new housewife at the time. And so she was willing to come on the podcast, or there were different people that I maybe had some connection to just from living in California for so long. People that I know, I would just beg people to come on the show very early on, and some people were kind enough to do it. But I also tried to do episodes where it would just be me, and so I wasn't reliant on a guest if I couldn't find someone.
Yeah, and do you feel like it's taken? I mean, I'm sure it has, but like the evolution of the show, obviously now you have, I mean, I feel like there's probably guests that you would love to still have, but you can pretty much get anyone, I feel. And like, do you feel like that evolution was really intentional, like where you made some changes to the format, or did it just sort of evolve naturally?
I think it sort of evolved naturally. I always have had a mix of guests and solo episodes, and even those very first two episodes I had guests. A guy named Bob Harper, who's a celebrity trainer. He was a host on The Biggest Loser and also a trainer on there. And so I had guests from the beginning, but as I mentioned, it was like sometimes I just couldn't book anyone, or I didn't know how. So I would do and mix in sort of stories about my life or recapping a lot of reality TV, which is, I think, a lot of how people found me. But it's interesting now. I've been doing this for 5+ years. I don't know how long it's been. But new people to my show, sometimes I'll put out an interview episode and people will be like, what's this? Or why are you interviewing someone? Or I like the recaps. And I'm like, I've always been doing the interviews, and I tried to put those in if maybe I can't get to a recap or something. But really the way that's evolved is early on, I had guests that I was begging to come on, and now I try to only have guests that I'm really interested in talking to. And I think that's one of the benefits of not being tied to having a guest for every episode, is I could just really talk to people that I want to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I feel very similar. I just started this podcast at the beginning of the year, and so haven't been doing it long. And I feel like I've already kind of gone through that evolution where I naturally was like, I'm going to talk about pop culture and the things that like have driven me in pop culture. And then that sort of turned into like having guests, and then it became more interview style. And then people kept saying like, oh, I love when you're like talking about Bravo. And I'm like, I know, but there's everyone's doing that. And there's like people that do it better than me. So like, I don't want to just do that. And then like Scandival hits, and then it's like, oh, you got to like dedicate time. And the recaps like become the ones that people are listening to. And then it's like, oh, you have to figure out like, are you doing it for them? Are you doing it for you? And like, what is kind of the right sort of balance? And I feel like you have found that, because you do have, these incredible guests and these awesome interviews, and then you still maintain sort of all the recaps and doing, talking about pop culture on your own as well.
Thank you. That Scandival really took the wind out of our sails for a little while. It was just like so exhausting, so fun, but exhausting. But I always think you really got to follow your gut. And over the years, when I've tried to sort of pivot because I'm getting messages, people are saying, oh, I don't like that person, or I just want recaps, or I don't like recaps, or whatever. There's always going to be differing opinions and stuff. So I always just try to go like, what do I want to do? And if there's a guest that I want to talk, sometimes those are my favorite ones, like a guest that I have on that I'm really so excited to talk about, but that I might know that I'm not sure the listeners really care, but I always just try to follow my gut. And then it always ends up surprising me. It'll be maybe not the biggest celebrity name or something, but because maybe I was passionate about it, then I'll hear from the listeners being like, I didn't know if I was going to listen to this, and I ended up really liking it. So the lesson is to just, I think, always follow your gut and do the show for you. And then hopefully other people will like it it too.
Absolutely. And speaking of Scandival, you were like essentially in the eye of the storm, because you had the book Fancy AF Cocktails. You were part of all of that, and then it became this like meme online of people like taking Sandoval out of that. How did you sort of balance being a partnership with these two people, and also while everything's going on?
Well, I think the good news was that the book had been out for a long time. So it wasn't like I was currently working on the book with them. But I don't know. With the recaps and anytime I'm talking about Bravo stuff, I really do try to keep it to like what's on the show, or if there is some sort of big news stories, I try to keep it to like what's going on, almost like they're characters, because I think it can be hard if you do know them personally, or they're, especially with reality TV, because people can be edited so much. So sometimes I'll be watching and I'll be thinking that's not how they are, or that is how they are, or they're not showing the full side of them. So I try to just judge based off of what's going on the show, or the big news items. But with something like that, it is hard, because I did know them both pretty well, or know them both pretty well. And so it was a weird situation.
Yeah. And do you ever feel like you get like censored on your own show because of the personal relationships? Like I know you had Gina on and you addressed calling her Casita on the podcast and stuff like, but have you ever felt like, oh, I shouldn't say something on the podcast because I have a bit of a more personal relationship with this person?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I don't feel that at all. I try to make the show really silly and funny, and I try not to say anything that I would be uncomfortable saying to their faces. So even with like Gina from the Real Houses of Orange County, like I've called her Casita forever, and I think it's really silly and funny, and it comes from her on the show. So yeah, I told her when she came on the show, and she was cool about it. But yeah, I suppose I try my best to not say anything in general that if I were to see these people out and about, I would feel too bad about. But
Right.
I'm sure I cross the line sometimes, and I'm sure I've said things that I shouldn't have. But I'm just trying to make people laugh and have an hour of escapism with the recap. So hopefully people take it in good fun. And a couple times, I mean, I've had people confront me. Tamara came on my show and she, said, why don't you like me or something like that? And we had it out a little bit, but she also took it really well, which I thought was great. Or there's been other housewives. Even in the wild, sometimes somebody, living in California, I had one housewife I won't name, but I saw her out and she kind of waved her finger at me. Like, I heard what you said, but so yeah, I think can cross the line, what I say,
Yeah.
but I try to keep it fun and silly. And I
Yeah.
also try to make fun of myself too. If I'm making fun of anyone else, I try to also just like, if I'm making some fun of someone's clothes, I always say like, I don't fucking know about clothes. Like I do my best. I'm not like, an
Right.
expert in this, but I think that's ugly. But what do I know?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask if you had ever heard from any of them but at the same time, because I have heard that before, especially in the housewives world, like they'll slide into the DMs and they have like a lot of opinions about, something that you said, and it's like, well, you did that on the show, and that is like whether you were portrayed that way or you actually like, are that kind of person. That's the character that's coming across. So when you sign up for the reality show, you're kind of are opening yourself up for that kind of judgment or,
Yeah.
comments and in your sort of style. And I try to believe in that same sort of value of like, it's all in fun. It's all because like, if we're not laughing at what's happening on Bravo and what we're doing, like, then what are we actually doing? Because it's meant to be fun and silly. It's
So
like,
silly.
we're not watching anything that serious.
And I try to not, if I'm not into a show at the time, I just won't cover it. Like if I think the season's kind of bland or something, and I'm like, I don't want to cover it. If I'm going to come to the microphone and be like a Danny Downer about it, I don't want to cover it. So I just will not talk about that Housewives franchise or whatever it is. But the other thing I've learned actually with the whole Bravo world very early on was that they will slide into your DMs, and oftentimes it's to like control a narrative. And so that's another reason why I think it's so important to sort of block out anything else and just go based off of what's on the show or kind of in the bigger press, because they will sometimes a housewife will try to give me some information or DM me some sort of information about something that happens in the upcoming season. And it's like, I understand what they're doing. They're trying to get ahead of a story, or they're trying to get people on their side, or sometimes they'll try to buddy up to like some of the podcasters or big social media accounts so that they give favorable opinions. So, I understand that. And I think it's important when I'm talking about it. That's why, again, to just keep it to what's on the show.
Yeah, neutral. Well, last like kind of housewives things, just curious about like some quick takes on the current ones. Like we talked a little bit about Tamara, so we don't have to go too far, but Tamara's return on OC and kind of where OC is kind of coming as it wraps.
I love Orange County this season. To me, this was really the return to form that they sort of promised last season with Heather coming back. I think Tamara is very divisive. And as I said, she had come on my show and confronted me after she was let go, because I was one of the people being like, oh, I'm so tired. Tamara needs a break, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I realized Tamara is very much a divisive person, but she does keep those storylines moving and keeps that show running, I think. And so even people, if you are out there and you're like, I fucking hate Tamra, I would just encourage that maybe we need people that sometimes we hate on these shows for the shows to be moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And what about the new cast of Roni?
I think Roni, haven't liked this season. And I know that's not a popular opinion. And I think the casting is great. But I, of course, loved the original Roni.
Right.
And I'm always so hesitant to talk about this because I know people feel very passionate. They really like it. And I think in season 2, we might have ourselves a season. But the season 1, my main issue with it is we're having 14 episodes this season. Okay. Right. And it's essentially a new show. And if you look at the history of Orange County and Atlanta, or even I think New York did too, those shows launched with 8-episode first seasons.
Right.
First seasons are usually a little slow and boring because we're getting to know the gals. I think New Jersey launched with 10 episodes, but they, of course, had that table flip, which is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, but still only 10 episodes. And so with something like the new Roni, that's essentially a new show. And I'm like, why are they doing 14 episodes? Because I think if they would have just kind of jammed the season into 8, I would have liked it more. And I think it would have moved quicker and it would have left us wanting more. But I'm like, why are we doing 14 episodes? Because these, I think, my opinion is that they're dragging and that there's not much going on. And I could sort of see the producer mechanics at play of trying to make a meal out of a snack or, trying to make a big thing out of something. I mean, there was that charcuterie thing at the beginning, which I kind of felt like was the producer saying, we don't really have anything else. And so let's make this into a comical fight about charcuterie. And to me, it screamed we don't have anything else. Where if you look at something like Salt Lake City Housewives, their first season, that very first episode had this hospital smell fight. Right. To me, that was organically quirky. It wasn't producers trying to we need to find something quirky for the show. Yeah. And so I look at it through that. I'm like, I don't think the producers think this is a good show. And that's my opinion. No one's, of course, said that. So with all of that said, I do think season 2 could be really great. I actually think the casting is fantastic. There was some trouble because one housewife that was cast initially they filmed with was then let go. So people are saying, gotta give it grace because they had to lose all those episodes. It's well, it's not my job to be giving them 100 episodes to make it exciting. They need to make it exciting for us. So that's where I stand. Are you liking it, Chris?
I do like it better than I thought because I thought how are we going to ever move to something new from what we had? Because we'll never have, Ramona and Dorinda and Sonia and and Luann. I mean, you will never recreate that. And so I was worried it was going to be too much of people trying to be those characters. And I'm glad that they're not doing that. But I agree. I mean, we're on the vacation for the it's 4 episodes or something. It feels like we're on the same vacation where, to your point, it's could we make that 2 episodes and cut a bunch of this other content and filler out? Because it does feel like a lot of filler. But I think and you can also tell that there's not a lot of natural bonds.
Yeah. And I think it's also very jarring because the original iteration of Roni, it was so chaotic. And I used to call it Roni whiplash because they would fight about something and then 2 seconds later be either fighting about something new or making up with each other. And then there'd be another layer of fights. Or there's this infamous scene from their Cartagena trip and they are fighting at the table. It's Dorinda and Luann fighting at one end of the table, and then Carol and Bethany at the other, and then Tinsley's kissing Sonia in the middle. And so it's that's the kind of show that we were used to when it came to Roni. And the new Roni is just not chaotic. There's not many storylines. It's one storyline about one of the wives taking the other one's cell phone, and that's it. They're all kind of talking about that one thing.
Yeah.
And that works on a lot of the other franchises. Beverly Hills tends to be singular focused on their episodes, but it is a huge shift for somebody who is watching this show or who has always watched Roni. It's not the same pace at all. And that's not a bad thing, but it's going to take us all some time to adjust. So I sort of felt crazy, especially during those first couple of episodes when everyone's it's the best show. I'm I'm still kind of getting my bearings, and I don't, and I just
Yeah.
felt like everybody was so excited, which good that we're excited about it, but I don't know. So
Yeah, I think we're excited about the girls maybe, like, and less about what we have.
yeah, you're
Would
right.
be how because I agree. I like there isn't the Cartagena, I mean, Scary Island. Like, there's so much always happening, and I think I've heard this before, but I feel like they should have called it season one,
Yeah,
and they should
totally.
have like it's a new show, and
Yeah.
we're like for somebody that's going to go rewatch later, it's like not going to make, and it's going to be a very strange transition.
But
Like
I
that's
always,
where people
yeah.
jump.
And I always feel you're so right. It should be a separate show name. And I always feel like with Bravo in general, they don't always do a good job of explaining things. And
Mhm.
because I hear from so many people who even listen to my podcast and listen to me recapping these shows, oftentimes they're messaging me because they're not so in tune with like the press cycle of stuff. They might
Right.
just listen to my podcast and watch the show when they're folding laundry. And so they don't always know like the goings on. So something like even Vanderpump Rules is like they didn't know why half the cast was fired, but they never explained on the show. And similarly with Roni, they never really they don't get into any of that. It's presented as Roni or as Real Houses of New York, but I always just think of the person who's watching casually who's like, what the fuck happened here? Why don't they explain something?
Yeah. Like what happened to all those characters that I was like supposed to be so invested in the
Yeah.
last episode I watched from last
Imagine
season.
General Hospital just like totally or what's is Susan Lucci on All My Children or General Hospital? I always mix it up. But it's like imagining just the cast leaving and all of a sudden you're turning it on in the heyday and you're like, where's Susan Lucci? And where are all these people that I've become so invested? They just completely left Pine Valley or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And kind of moving to the next one, because you kind of mentioned the Cartagena trip, which is where I feel like we're getting with the Trixie Motel of it all on Salt Lake City. How are you feeling about this season? Because I think we were coming out of a pretty rough road out of the last season, and I was a little worried. But where do you feel like we've landed this season?
I feel like Salt Lake really gives me that quirky thing that I was missing from the old Roni, and all the characters are crazy and weird, and I love them. I just find it so exciting, and it moves super quickly. The one thing with Salt Lake, I wonder if those people who maybe are doing their dinner or folding their laundry, if it's easy for them to keep up with everything on Salt Lake because it's moving just at a rapid pace, which I personally love.
Yeah.
But so I think we're in a good spot. I think Jen was taking up a lot of the air in the room with everything going on, and so it gives the other women a chance to breathe and a chance to kind of have more layers to the show. So I think we're in a great spot. I'm so excited about the rest of the season. Sort of anecdotally from, people who work on these shows and stuff behind the scenes, everyone seems to think the season of Salt Lake is really good. So I'm excited about what's to come.
Yeah. And I think Monica was like the perfect casting choice to sort of bridge the gap of the Jen Shaw, like where you say, like, because actually, like recently, Jenny was back in the news for like showing up at some like Whitney Rose event or whatever. And I literally was like, oh, I forgot about Jenny. And like we never got like any kind of like conclusion to her story or that why she's not on it. And it's like, oh, I forgot about Jenny. And like there she is popping up. But I feel like Monica was the right thing because she can talk about Jen Shaw and sort of bridge a lot of the relationships and how they might fall apart as a result of, things that Jen had said in the past and stuff. So I'm loving it. And I think like, I mean, she just keeps dropping these bombs and I'm like, okay, I could follow her for the hour and just be entertained. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving seeing like, Meredith engaging finally. And, I feel like you said, like Jen took a lot of the air and now I feel like people are showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Meredith, I realized this season, she's like an A+ level housewife. Like she, to me, all of a sudden, I don't know if she just stepped into her role at Trixie Motel, and I've always liked her, but I'm like, oh, now she's giving like all-time great housewife to me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even just like when they first arrive and she comes out of her room and the other girls are sitting poolside and she like looks at them silently and like gives them this like nod and goes, I'm just like, I felt every emotion in that scene. Like she's doing some serious camera work that I am loving. And yeah,
so unpredictable. It's like you don't know what accent you're going to get. You don't know what kind of look you're going to get. You just don't know anything.
Oh, the dinner was incredible.
Oh, so good. And having Mary back, I think, is like that sort of X factor that Salt Lake I like. And I think she works best in a friend role, Mary.
Yeah, because I think otherwise we go too dark. And I think that we need her just sort of like on the surface.
Yeah. And yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit, because like I said at the top, like some of the things that you post and that you talk about from pop culture past, it's like, I feel like and I mean, even in this book, I feel like I'm reading stories of myself. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been excited about, which I'm going to kick off with the NSYNC reunion. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
What are what are you hoping for? Because there's a lot of rumors of like, is there more coming, or is this it? Do we just get the song and the, hot ones, or, now Super Bowl has been announced. It's not NSYNC as some people thought it might be. Where are you at with the NSYNC reunion?
Well, I'm so thrilled that we're getting even just JC sort of coming out of retirement, because he's my turtleneck prince. I love that man. And he's been sort of in hiding outside of his Meow Mix commercials, which is a tale for another time. But I'm happy that they're doing some sort of thing back. I still feel like it's a tour. I know it's been back and forth, because I've seen conspiracy theories online. People are saying like, don't say it's a tour. It's not a tour. It's just the one song. But then I think like they must have hired a PR and a PR for the band. So obviously like Justin has his own PR, but the group now has a PR that they have actively working for them, because they were booked on Hot Ones and VMAs. And you don't just book that, I don't think, to just do one Hot Ones. So I would imagine there has to be like a larger plan.
Right. I mean, I know Joey Fatone was at 90s Con a couple of weeks ago and mentioned, he got asked in a Q&A about it. And he said something like, Justin's about to release a new album, so he's going to have to go on a promo cycle for that and probably a tour for that. And he was like, we hear you. You guys want an NSYNC tour. We have heard you. I hope that we'll do one, but we don't have it. And so I'm wondering, are they going to try to fold it into Justin's promo for his solo album and then have it be an NSYNC Justin tour? But I wonder how you feel about that, given, I don't think I have to ask if you were between Justin and JC because of the acknowledgments in your new book. I think it speaks very clearly which side you were on.
I did dedicate the Christmas book to my JC, JC Chasez.
The reason for the season.
The reason for the season. Yes. Have you listened to the NSYNC Christmas album, Under the Tree? I mean, come on.
I mean, every year.
No, I'm definitely team JC. And I think I agree with you. And my sort of conspiracy theory was that Justin has tour dates booked, but I thought for next year, I thought they were throwing us off the scent with that. I was thinking they probably booked him under his name.
Yeah.
For NSYNC to do them. Or maybe there's some sort of hybrid, like you mentioned, where it's Justin's going on tour, but then maybe we get NSYNC and it becomes I think these shows have to become bigger and bigger. We look at this summer with Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and their tours were the biggest tours in ages. And I think it's because there's such a specialness to those two.
Right. Not
Not to say that Justin couldn't do something special on his own, but I think there is some sort of world where maybe he is doing a big tour that's his music and NSYNC, or I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it goes, because I feel there's people like you that were firmly what happened to JC. He was the front man. He was the number one guy in the group. And, to go to a show where NSYNC is more of a feature on the Justin Timberlake solo tour.
It'd be hard.
Yeah, I feel like that would be strange. But I think maybe people would take it whatever way they could get it.
Whatever way they can get it. But I also just want to reiterate or recommend that whatever they are doing for the performances, we need to make sure JC's mic is up, because I've noticed even when NSYNC did that VMA thing 10 years ago, they turned down JC's mic and it was Justin's mic is loud and clear. And whatever it is, if JC does want to sort of be in the background a little bit, or if it is Justin's tour featuring NSYNC, I just need to make sure JC's mic is up. It needs to be at least as loud as Justin for whatever we're getting in the future. I need to
Okay.
say that.
That's noted. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't like
as if you're in charge of this, Chris. I'm like,
yeah.
you're
Yeah,
the
I'll let
audio
them know.
engineer. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm so thrilled to see them back. And, I don't want it to be a Justin tour though, because that's what I'm worried. I worry that it would be like Justin doing like trying to be relevant today, doing whatever, his album is going to sound like, and then like NSYNC nostalgia. And I don't know if those two things are going to go together. So I'd rather it just be, the NSYNC nostalgia. And were you always like an NSYNC over Backstreet Boys, or did you have different feelings?
Yeah, I think I was. I mean, I always lean more towards NSYNC, but with that said, I also love my BSB, and specifically, I think AJ has like one of the best voices ever. I'm obsessed with AJ from Backstreet Boys. The sexiest rasp, is that what you say? Rasp, his voice. I just love his voice. So specifically, and Kevin was like a sexual awakening for me. I was very attracted to Kevin from BSB.
Oh wow.
So yes, I do love them, and they have some good songs, but my heart does lean towards NSYNC.
Yeah, same. I'm surprised about the Kevin though, because I feel like Kevin was always like the one that they sort of like said was like the ugly one. Well, I guess Howie maybe was. Like,
I always felt like Howie was, even though Howie is very attractive, but we were all bamboozled. I mean, because I've been noticing lately, I'm not proud of this, but I've just been sort of having an awakening with Joey Fatone, and I'm finding him very sexy lately. I don't know. He's kind of got a salt and pepper kind of thing going on, but I never once found him attractive when I was younger. And now I'm like, oh my God, look at Joey. So yeah. I don't know. Kevin, the Backstreet Boys, what was that video, Quit Playing Games with My Heart, where they were like dancing in the rain?
Yeah.
And they had their blouses opened, everyone but Nick. Nick was like fully dressed.
Well, he was like underage, I think, at that point.
Yeah. Well, okay, wait, Chris, this is so weird because I was just on TikTok last night, and just because Justin Timberlake, somebody had posted a video where it was like his evolution, and I didn't even realize how young he was. Like when he came out with Like I Love You, I think they said he was 18 or something. I was like, what? Because he's older than me, so I always just assumed that he was older.
Right.
But I'm like, how was he? Justin was only 18.
Yeah.
Maybe he was 19.
I mean, they were teenagers.
And that was his solo. So in NSYNC, he was even younger. I'm like, that was crazy. To me, they were always just older.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like Nick was like maybe me. I mean, I don't have Wikipedia open, but I would say, 14 or something in that.
That's crazy.
And I think that's why he's like the one buttoned up, and they were
so
probably
that
like,
makes
that's
sense.
probably too young to put him on display like that. But
I was also very attracted to, this isn't popular either, but I was attracted to 98 Degrees because they were always sort of muscly. I think they had like, just the arm muscles, and they always had, I was attracted to Jeff specifically.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that like, I feel like that's what they sold. They sold like the sex and the, the arms, and that was like their thing. That was like who they were. Whereas
everyone but the one guy who was serving realtor, 40-year-old realtor. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah, he like did not fit in either. He always felt like he was the Andrea Zuckerman.
Justin, I think his name was.
98 Degrees. He was so much older than everyone else. Yeah, Joey Fatone lately, especially at the VMAs. My friend Emily, who's a huge fan of yours, by the way, she was freaking out when I told her that we were doing this today. And she showed me a picture of Joey Fatone over the weekend and was like, I feel like Joey Fatone is bringing it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like, there's some sexiness happening.
There's something, I don't know, he just grew into the look. I even was watching Hot Ones, and I was like, Joey's really giving it to me. And of course, JC is still my number one, but Joey's given me something.
Even after the Meow Mix, which is surprising.
They sent me I have a Meow Mix shirt, but like it's got, so JC did the commercials for Meow Mix where he's like a boy band or a cat or something. Yeah. And they sent me a shirt, but it's like it doesn't have JC on it. It just has like these singing cats. And I'm like, well, I can't just wear a shirt that has singing cats on it, because then you have to explain like this. One of them is supposed to be JC Chasez. It's like too much explanation.
Yes. Yeah, no. I thought it was an SNL skit when I first saw it. I thought it was like he like had come back for one of those like digital shorts on SNL, and then we were like, oh, this is a real commercial that he's doing. I mean, it was wild.
I
But
mean, the fact that he's doing Meow Mix, I want him back in the public consciousness and where he deserves to be and
yeah,
making music. And I want to hear that silky voice. I'd love to,
yeah,
I think it'd be hard for him to relaunch with a pop career, but I would like to see him put out something like a standards album or kind of go in that. This is not going to be popular, but like go in that sort of, maybe do a Christmas album, like a solo Christmas project, or do like a Broadway album, or like kind of one of those themey things to bring them back into the consciousness and then expand from there.
yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe that was what the intention was with Meow Mix, was like, let's bring him back. Then we've
Relaunch.
got the NSYNC relaunch, and then maybe he's got more planned. So fingers crossed.
Your mouth to JC's ears.
So one thing, I don't know if I like know where you stand on this, but was a huge part of my pop culture sort of influence. Britney, where do you stand with the Britney of it all?
Love Britney.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I was raised by Britney and I love her. I'm excited. Her book comes out the same day as mine, which I
know.
really love. My parents ordered her book and not my own, which is a problem. Like I had to log into their account and my mom can't work all the technology stuff. So she was asking me to help her with the returns. She's like, can you figure this out? So I log into her Amazon. It said like 2 pre-order open orders, Britney Spears book. And I was like, Mom, you guys ordered like not just one, they ordered 2 copies and they don't even like listen to Britney Spears or anything. My mom's like, oh, Dan, I saw it. I saw it on Entertainment Tonight or something. And I'm like, well, what about my book?
Well, maybe Linda was trying to surprise you for Christmas. Maybe it was going to be like
she just
gift.
wanted a free copy. She knew she was getting a free copy of mine. But no, I love Britney. I'm excited to read her book. And I always just want whatever is best for her, whatever she wants and is happy. And I'm just always like constantly rooting. And I've always heard such wonderful things, even from friends who have maybe like worked peripherally with her at different news stations or entertainment outlets or whatever, or have interviewed her. It's like everybody always just says like how sweet she is. And so I'm always just rooting for her because I think she's just such a sweet soul.
Yeah, I always hear the same too. I feel like anyone in like I used to be in the music industry, and people always said like when she was in the studio, she's very professional. She's got a lot of ideas. She is not like what everyone kind of talks about. I could do a whole episode on her, which I probably will at some point, just because there's so much to dissect with Britney and the celebrity and versus like an artist and all of that. But yeah,
and Chris, wait, don't you think that's rare though? You mentioned working in the music industry. Oftentimes that's not the case when somebody comes up in conversation.
Yeah.
So to have like a pretty big consensus that you're always like nice and kind and sweet is pretty rare, I think.
Yeah, it's it's wonderful to hear those things though, because of what like obviously the media and what is always out about her is not focused on positive overall. So it's always nice when you hear kind of those behind the scenes stories where people don't have to put on anything, and like they don't have to say something nice because the cameras aren't rolling and no one's recording, and they could say whatever they want, but it always seems to be pretty positive, which is good to hear.
What's your favorite Britney song?
Oh, we do this all the time and I feel like it changes. I think it's like cliche to say Baby One More Time, but it's just like it introduced me. I mean, I bought the single and everything took off from there for me. Like I felt like I finally, I didn't end up coming out until I was 30, but I feel like in that moment I came out with myself when I heard Baby One More Time for the first time. I was like, I finally know who I am.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, I love that song too. I think Just Love Me is my favorite of hers. It's wasn't a single, but I love it. But all of her music, I mean, I think, yeah, Stronger, Baby One More Time, Born to Make You Happy really makes me happy. Some of that older stuff.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk about the book because you mentioned Linda. She makes several appearances in here, but I absolutely loved it, and
Thank you.
you obviously have a very close relationship with Christmas. It can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, as we learn in the book, for you. But tell me kind of why did you pick this specific time frame to sort of pull the stories from and share them with the world now?
I had written a book called How Do I Unremember This that came out last year. And I noticed the thing that sort of resonated most with people were these family stories. And as I was writing it, I was inspired by people like David Sedaris and Gene Shepard, kind of like these weird things that happen in your life that you kind of hone and focus in on. And so it's not, none of my books are like memoir exactly. It's not like about how I start a podcast or something. They're more stories that are supposed to make you laugh and or make you feel something. And when I was writing that first book, there were a few different chapters that were about holiday times because I was writing about family and stories about family. And I obviously couldn't include like 100 Christmas stories in that first book. And so I always kind of very early on knew that I wanted to do like a holiday collection. I love a book by David Sedaris, Holidays on Ice. He has like his own Christmas collection, but there aren't a lot of essay collections or story collections centered around the holidays. And what I love about that David Sedaris book is that every holiday season I can pick it up and kind of read it again the same way that I do with like holiday movies. I have to watch Home Alone every year, or, those classics that my family always watches Christmas Vacation together, or whatever those movies are. And so I wanted to have a book that people could pick up sort of every year and have some laughs, maybe laugh at their own family or remind them of their own family stories. But so that's kind of the evolution of it. But some of these stories were things that I wrote for the first book that I sort of saved. And then even once I had finished that first book, I just kept writing these new stories. So there wasn't much of a break. So hopefully they feel sort of tonally similar to the first book, but I love the holiday seasons. They're very high emotions. So it's like, if you love the holidays, I think hopefully you'll read this book and feel the love. But if you hate the holidays, hopefully you'll also read this book and be like, oh my God, yes, it's a nightmare, and laugh at sort of the absurdity around it. But it's such heightened emotions around the holidays because you're trying to craft the perfect days, and it's impossible to do. And you're forced together with family a lot of the times, which can be its own sort of chaos. And so I think I love the holiday season for all of those reasons. I think there's so much comedy to be seen around the holidays. And so, yeah. Did I answer the question?
You did, okay. Yes. And, and sometimes not even just forced to be with families. Sometimes you're forced to be with strangers for, a 30-something hour car ride. The chapter about Claudia, I was laughing out loud, and I don't want to like give away too much so that people can read it, but it was so like it just kept getting worse and worse, this road trip you were on. And I mean, the way that you were writing it was just so hilarious. And all I kept thinking is, as I was approaching the end of the story, was I need to know where Claudia is today. And you don't know.
I don't know. No, I don't know. No. And almost like a Christmas angel that came into my life for that short period of time and then left me. It's always, truth is stranger than fiction. So that's the other thing that I learned from my first book, and this one. The truth, obviously, these are stories that like I remember in my own life, and I change a lot of details, and there's of course editorializing and right. There's all that stuff. But usually, like the crazier bits of all of this stuff, it's like that's the stuff that, if anything, I think I scale back on, or I learned from my first book, certain family stories where my brother would be like, "Oh, you forgot to put this part in," and I'm like, "Oh my God, I forgot that happened on top of all this chaos." And so, yeah, the kind of more outlandish stuff, I'm like, if anything, I feel like those parts of the stories are scaled back. But yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. And the some of the other pieces from the book, I learned that you also, like me, share a fear of birds.
I do not like birds.
All I could picture was Linda, because you kept saying that the pot of water was boiling. and all I could picture was your mother catching this pigeon with a hot pot and your dad coming in and asking if that's what's for dinner. And I just was like, it was amazing. It was so funny. And I felt
Thank
like
you.
I was in the house with you guys.
Oh, thank you. Well, Chris, yeah, you're telling a story about a bird that flew into our house one time when I was home with my mom, and I mean, I will never forget my mom just when the bird flew in, like the chaos. I mean, yeah, it's like the chaos of having a bird in the house is a lot, as it is. But I just, I remember thinking it was so funny even at the time, like watching my mom be so chaotic with the bird in the house. I don't
And no,
know.
like her going in the room and shutting the door, and you just like
I don't know
hearing all the banging, and you're like, I don't know what was in there, but it was a brawl, and like it's so funny.
And moms do it all. Like they do all that shit, and the amount of things that moms have to do. And really, the book too was like a love letter to moms. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but my mom, she put so much effort into the holidays, and I know so many people do too. And putting so much effort into that, it can cause it never goes how you want it to. So that's a lot of times what causes a lot of the chaos and the hilarity around the holidays is because whether it's a mom or somebody else in the family, there's usually like one person who's like focused on shepherding the whole holiday season, and it never is good for them. They always have a hard holiday. Whoever's the one kind of in charge of all that stuff, it's like their holiday season isn't so fun. So this book is really dedicated to all those people too, the moms or otherwise who are kind of those spearheaders of the holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the chapter about now and then, I felt like it was another time where I was like, Danny and I are like living in parallel lives, because I very similarly felt like I needed to go to the movie with my then stepsisters because I wanted to, like, I was like, oh, I don't really want to see that movie, but secretly was like, I need to see Devon Sawa and see this movie because I feel like it's going to be like the movie of my lifetime, which very well could be. But I loved it, and I think it was later in the book. I don't think it was that chapter. You also talked about like sort of secretly getting like an Out magazine to read the article about like Danny from the real world. Were there other times where you were like doing kind of these like secretive like moves where you felt like I need to portray myself masculine in some kind of way, but really you were like hiding all of this by getting something else?
Oh yeah, I mean all the time. I think back to my childhood. I grew up in Ohio, and I have two older brothers who played sports and kind of fit in those stereotypes of masculinity. And I just always sort of felt torn. I was expected to play sports, and I was expected to kind of fill into those roles because I was the youngest, and it was just kind of how my family had operated. But then I would have these interests that were a little off-centered or more feminine, or there were always times that I wanted to kind of go a different way than my two older brothers, and so that was constant. I look back, I remember taping over one of my brothers. Back in the day, you had to record something off TV with the VCR and
Right.
VHS players. And I was obsessed with like recording things off TV and having my own sort of multimedia collection. But I remember like taking my brother's tapes, and they would have like the Terminator and Karate Kid. And there was one time I taped over one of them with First Wives Club. And so even at a young age, I thought I was like sort of hiding those parts of me. But I look back now, it's like, oh yeah, they were mad at me for taping over with First Wives Club. Like, of course that I was the gay kid.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think at the time I just sort of thought I was fooling them or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try now to always hold on to that, of like, to celebrate the things that I love and not to feel ashamed, because for so long in my youth, I would be afraid of liking the things that I'd like. I'd be ashamed that I was watching the Rosie O'Donnell show every day after school, or wanted to see Now and Then, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now I
Yeah.
try not to feel guilty about those pleasures.
Yeah. And that's what was so, I felt so connected in those moments and the way that you were telling that story, because like for me, it was very similar. Like I had to, I mean, I have all of the like kind of Goosebumps series. And of course I read them at the time because I needed to be able to talk to them,
I have
talk
here,
about
Chris.
them.
Look what I got,
I,
the
I,
Goosebumps right here.
I literally have them right over here, like all of them
I
lined
got
up
a
on my
whole
bookshelf.
collection right here, literally at my desk.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
Um, but yeah, it's like I read them because I needed to be able to talk at, the lunch table with my, the guy friends that I had, but also was like hoping that I could secretly find like, a torn up copy of like Babysitter's Club books or like something that I could like read that I felt like a little bit more connected to. And so I really
Yeah.
like connected with you in that moment in the Now and Then story, because I think you're telling your personal story, but there's a lot of people out there that are doing really similar things to sort of hide who they are. And I think like ultimately kind of how you end that chapter, and like I think it is very, empowering of like you can be who you want to be. You don't years later, you're still after this Now and Then book because it still meant something to who you were, but now you were able to be yourself and find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, specifically that chapter is about getting the book version of Now and Then. But even when the movie had come out, I remember just the girls being able to go, my classmates were so easily able to celebrate the movie. And I just was in my head as a young kid thinking like, I want that too. But I didn't want the other boys in class or my brothers or family or whoever to think, oh, he likes that girly thing. Cause it was so stereotypically marketed towards young women.
Yeah.
But you don't understand that as a young kid either. You don't understand like, well, why can't I like that? Or should I just be confident enough to like it? It's you're doing these mental gymnastics in your head, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved growing up. I loved watching 90210, and I felt like that was one of those things where I was like, I can't tell people that I like it. I like know what's going on, and so if I ever did sort of dip into a conversation about it, it was like, well, like my mom watches it, so I see it or whatever. But my mom and I had like kind of an agreement that on Wednesday nights it would come on at 7 p.m. And if I was outside in the neighborhood playing with like the neighbor kids, she would just come out and open the door and say, Chris, it's 7. And that
It's
was like code for
90210
me.
time.
Like, you're going to come in and watch your show.
Chris, we are literally so in sync. Not to bring that because my family, we did we all watched 90210 together.
Yeah.
Even my brothers would too, but I remember my brothers they were always like talking about how hot, Gina Kincaid was or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there thinking in my head, like, I'm very attracted to Brian Austin Green or, remember Kelly's boyfriend. What was that guy in the later seasons? He just showed up on it just like that. Daniel Cosgrove was his name, actor.
Yeah.
But I remember being so attracted to that man.
Yeah.
And just, in my head the whole time being like, oh my God, I think I love him.
Yeah. And I loved it. And it was my gateway into having Barbies ultimately, because they had 90210 dolls. And so I told my mom, like, well, I don't want to play with them. I just love the show so much that I need to have them as collector's items. And so I had like those, and that was like my gateway into dolls. And ultimately, if Donna Martin cut her hair on the show, then I like took scissors to the Barbie. And so I don't have them anymore, unfortunately. But, that might be like my gift to myself at some Christmas is like, I need to find these like, original 90210 dolls, because that would make me very happy.
I've leaned into my collector nature, and my office is loaded. I can't get it. It's out of reach, but I have I'm staring at a Rosie O'Donnell Barbie. I have my JC Chasez doll. I have 2 nanny dolls.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And I think it's good. I obviously wrote about it in the book, but I think there is some sort of pleasure as an adult to be able to get some of those things that you wanted or were emotionally attached to as a kid. I think there is some sort of good thing that happens if you have the money to do it, to hop on eBay. Sometimes the stuff is so cheap, but I love it.
Yeah.
But my boyfriend hates it because he's like, you got to stop buying junk.
Yeah, I know. My husband would probably feel the same. Like he's like, whenever we get something, I'm like, oh, I've got to get that. And he's like, is that going up in the office? That's going on your shelf? Because it's not going anywhere else. We do have a framed poster of Britney Spears in our garage, but I think that's kind of like my pop culture in the main part of the house, and then the rest of it's like just in the office.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I just urge everyone to go get the book on the 24th. I mean, yes, people will have to, they're going to get the Britney book. They're going to get Cher's new album comes out the same day, her
What a
Christmas
week,
album.
Chris. What a
So
week.
you picked some like amazing diva pop culture iconic date to release this. So which goes perfectly for you. But I urge
and there's
people
a
to
whole
get it.
chapter about Cher's Christmas in the book, which so there it's a great. They make great sister gifts.
Yeah, and you didn't know that the album was coming when you wrote the book, I have to assume.
No,
right?
and I just recorded the audiobook, and I think I added like a little line because I write this whole chapter. Cher didn't ever have a Christmas album, and all of a sudden now she has one coming out 4 days before this book. But there happens to just be a Cher holiday chapter, so they make perfect companions.
Yeah, so you'll have to make room for the Cher album alongside NSYNC, because that's my go-to for the holiday albums as well. But I will dip into the Cher. I love that she just called it Christmas.
That album is going to be fucking insane, and I cannot wait. It's going to be, she keeps saying, she's like, it's not your mom's Christmas album. Like, she keeps saying that specifically. And then, the cover art is crazy. And also on the leaked cover art, it says, featuring the single, or featuring the song, and the song is called DJ Play a Christmas Song. And I'm like, I cannot fucking wait to be able to listen to DJ Play a Christmas Song by Cher. I cannot wait.
Truly,
I'm buzzing.
Like, maybe the new reason for the season will be Cher. But you mentioned it a little bit, but like I do feel like the book is something that people can pick up year after year, and that's what's so great is that they're short stories. You don't have to. You could pop around, or if there's just a story that like really resonates with you, you can go revisit it time and time again. So it's wonderful that
little nuggets. You could pick it up, but read a chapter on the toilet, or somewhere. Listen, if you got the audiobook, you can listen to one chapter while you're driving to the grocery store. They're easy, digestible.
Yeah,
it's an easy read.
Yeah, and there's detours and footnotes, and so don't miss those, because that's oftentimes where some of the like funniest moments in the book are.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
It's definitely something that everyone should get. It's out October 24th, but tell everyone kind of like what's next and where can they keep up with you, so that they don't miss anything Danny Pellegrino.
Yeah, please get the book. I should also mention there's like a Thanksgiving chapter, there's a Halloween chapter, so there's some other holidays in there too. But it's please get it so they let me write another one. But I also have another book called How Do I Unremember This? So it's in paperback now. So if you like the Christmas one, you can go back and get that. I'm on Instagram and social media at Danny Pellegrino. And then my podcast is called Everything Iconic. I'll be touring in October. So there's still tickets available to San Francisco, to Nashville. I'm going to be in Nashville right before Halloween. And then also Cleveland, my hometown. So you can get those at everythingiconic.com and come see me. It's going to be really fun. And we'll talk a lot of Bravo and Housewives on the tour. So it'll be a lot of Bravo stuff. But we have a good time. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I was so thrilled to have you, because I feel like oftentimes I'm like reading my own diary, reading yours. So it's wonderful to meet you and to have you on the show. And I will definitely be continuing this one, and then reading your next one, because I'm sure this one's going to be a New York Times bestseller, just like the first.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. This was truly such a pleasure. I'm glad we got to chat.
Yes, me too. Well, thank you, Danny. And for all of you listening, don't forget to rate and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of The Gist. You can follow me. I'm at CM Vetrano on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, TikTok, all the things. But until next week, thanks so much
Chris,
for listening.
I'm interrupting you again.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go for it.
You just told everyone to rate and review the podcast. And I know podcasters say that a lot, right? Like we all say that. But it really does help. So if you're listening to this podcast and you like it, please go leave Chris a nice review, a 5-star. Don't leave it if you don't want to do 5-star, then you just do something else with your day. But it really does help a lot. And it might be something that takes 2 seconds, and you might not be thinking it's a big deal, but it really helps to get people to listen to the podcast and to share the podcast, and helps it grow and all those things. So if you are enjoying Chris's podcast, like take the 2 seconds. I know it's annoying, pain in the ass, but please do it for Chris.
Well, thank you for that. Love that PSA. Appreciate it. But until next week, It's Danny and Chris. We're going to sign off, and we will. You can find us on socials.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.